literally said in her speech, imagine a world of electric. But now that's right up there with Einstein. Like, I think before I go to bed at night, I put my head on the pillow, and I don't think about, geez, space travel to Mars, or maybe conquering different galaxies. I think, what about a world with electric school buses? Wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't get to sleep because I'm just thinking about it. And
And of course,
wow, all the possibilities.
what I find really hysterical is all of these people pushing for electric cars and electric buses, and yet they fail to take into consideration that these things have to be charged, and the electricity to charge them is generated by oil and gas and
Oh no, no, it
coal.
is hysterical to me that our power grid is actually quite dirty. These people don't get it. They think it's just because they're supposed to be the party of science, correct, Dr. Lopkin? But they're the ones who say that literally now it's gotten to the point that they actually believe it and expound this on this is that men can get pregnant. Okay, really? And the whole thing is like, yes, electric
Well,
cars are completely green. No, they're not. Plus, you got to dispose of them, and it's a friggin' hazardous waste situation.
yeah, there's a lot of problems both with the construction and destruction of electric cars that are actually worse for the environment than the existing cars. But this actually is part of a bigger problem, and it was touched on in, of all places, New York Magazine in their Intelligencer column, where the author wrote about the fact that disinformation has become a danger to the Democratic Party because they decided in 2016 that, oh, people are being lied to. That's why they elected Trump, because they didn't have the facts. It was all about disinformation. And over the years, this has become so ingrained in the Democratic Party that they are lying to themselves and lying to themselves about how the American public is looking at their policies. So this disinformation goes to the science. It doesn't matter what the facts are. Ricky Gervais just did a comedy special on Netflix, and he talks about the fact that people are digging up tweets from 10 years ago so you could get in trouble. And now the biggest thing you can say to get in trouble is that women don't have penises. And well, 10 years ago, nobody said that because nobody imagined it needed to be said.
That is an amazing point. Like, I believe in certain environments, e- even the corporate the world. If you said, I really believe that men can't get pregnant, you could be on administrative leave. That's how it's gotten.
Yeah,
That's how crazy it's gotten.
yes, the disinformation has gone crazy. And in fact, while we were all focusing on the tragedy that happened in Texas yesterday was a big blow towards that Democratic disinformation, because if everybody remembers, they've been rallying against Georgia's voting laws, saying it's all about voter suppression and this was Jim Crow 2.0. Well, yesterday was the Georgia primary, and both parties had record turnouts with no long lines to deal with, which just blew the Democrats' story about voter suppression out of the water.
Well, it's all about, again. It does relate to the party, so-called, of science. They're always more of late, at least over the last 10 years, definitely the emotional party, the safe room party. They just spew out so-called fact, their own twisted facts, and they get so enraged and outraged, and but they never bother, just like you've just articulated. What are the actual events on the ground? What is the actual
Right.
science about men getting pregnant? And speaking of that, I think we talked about it months ago, but Apple has a emoji of a man who's pregnant. Hmm.
Yes, Apple
All
has
righty
that
then.
emoji. Calvin Klein just came out with an ad featuring a pregnant man. Yeah, men can't get pregnant that. I mean, short of massive scientific experimentation on them, men don't get pregnant. It doesn't happen.
Well, I definitely think it would be a good comedy routine, one of those like hidden candid cameras. Have someone call, call into work and say, "Listen, I can't really make it. I need to take some time off because I'm getting a little morning sickness because I'm pregnant." See what their reactions would be. I bet in
Yes.
another 3 years, if this continues, they'd probably say, "Yes, Mr. Sherman, just take the day off," because he'd be scared about being sued.
And that's what it's really all about. It's about fear of being canceled, fear of being sued, and we need to get back to some semblance of reality and stop kowtowing to these small minorities. I mean, the folks in what's called the transgender community, if you speak to actual transgender individuals, this transgender community doesn't speak for them. This is just a small group that has said, what we say goes, and we're going to cancel you. And they don't speak for the transgender people any more than Al Sharpton speaks for all African
And
Americans.
that was one of the greatest things you said. It's 100%, and that's why blacks are leaving the Democratic Party for that very reason. And heard transgenders and gays say, "You don't have to speak for me," or Hispanics. The Democrats free, open immigrate. No, they don't want that. I think they're so out of touch. The Nancy Pelosi's with their platinum American Express, they don't even know what real people think or believe. No one believes in that. No
That,
sane person believes men can get pregnant. But then they have testimony in front of
well,
Congress, and they ask him these. No, I mean, a
unfortunately,
fringe dude. What say?
yeah,
Sorry.
unfortunately, I've spoken to otherwise relatively intelligent people that have come to believe, oh, this must be true. And this is what happens when you get your news in a bubble. We've talked about this for over a decade, being in the echo chamber. When you hear something over and over again, you start to believe it.
Agreed. It's like Goebbels in The Big Lie. He actually said that.
Yes,
Say things over and over, and it becomes reality. Very,
exactly.
very interesting and troubling. Speaking of troubling, a new maybe a health concern, monkeypox. I don't know a lot about it. Maybe you can help our listeners out, but it seems to be gaining some steam. Maybe Fauci can use that to leverage his third comeback.
Well, that's really what this is about. The media is using monkeypox. The politicians are using monkeypox to scare people into doing what they want and to watching over and over again. Monkeypox have been around for decades. Monkeypox is actually a very similar virus to smallpox. There was an outbreak of it in the early 2000s. There have been outbreaks of it before. We actually have treatments for it. We have vaccines for it. And unlike COVID, this is not something you can walk past somebody and actually catch. Basically, you have to have intense personal contact. And in fact, most of the existing cases that they're talking about were actually spread via sex.
Hmm.
So
That's what I heard
this
too.
is
Yes.
not some yeah, this is not something that people need to be freaking out about. It looks disgusting. I mean, you get these welts on you, so that helps the fear factor. But this is something that we've known about. We have treatments for. We have vaccines for.
Yeah, but you were
Basically, what
talking
happens
about the
is
mainstream media and the Democratic apparatchik. No good opportunity would go unused. Correct, Dr. Lopkin?
yes, it goes
Regardless
back
of
to
the
what we
fact.
were just yeah, it goes back to what we were just talking about disinformation.
Interest. Well, speaking of disinformation, we have Biden's trip to his Asia trip, and he was again a gaffe machine. We'll talk about that in a second. But he was also he didn't even wasn't exactly a great look for the commander in chief, having to be led around like Weekend at Bernie's. She did not look like a strong leader in any way, shape, or form. We talk about Trump, and we pointed out all his abnormalities and personal shortcomings, which there are many of them. But at least when he was on the world stage, he was always at the center. People were flocking around him. Clinton was the same way. This guy looks feeble. He just looks tired, and he looks like he's not up for the job. Your comments?
Yeah, I think that pretty much says it all. He's not up to the job. And we have never had a president, Republican or Democrat, that was this feeble this early in his presidency. There was a lot of talk about Reagan going back to the 80s, but that was at the end of his second term. This is something that we elected him, and he didn't even look like he could handle the job day one. And as time goes on, he gets more and more feeble. And they keep talking about the fact, well, yes, he's going to run for reelection, and then they'll go as long as he's healthy. And they have to put that caveat in because the world knows he isn't healthy.
Well, the world knows he's not going to run. You already have the sharks circling him. Elizabeth Warren a couple weeks ago was on every talk show imaginable. Of course, she's going to run. I mean, he's going to be primary, just like Carter was primaried against with Kennedy in with 1980. He's definitely going to be. I don't think he's even going to make it. And his comments. Actually a danger to humanity. I'm not just saying that to make a grandiose point. I really believe that, talking about, our
No, no,
commitment to Taiwan. And I
the
mean,
White House administration has done a good job walking back his comments. But if you take his comments together as a whole, he has basically said we're going to get into war with Russia. He
mhm,
encouraged Putin, said, well, a minor incursion is fine.
of course.
Now he's saying that we will militarily defend Taiwan. So he was so anxious to get out of Afghanistan, but he's going to get us into war with both Russia and China.
Well, he could stumble. The only, I think, redeeming quality, at least I've thought of, or preventative factor, is I think both Russia and China know he's not in charge, so that he's not taken as seriously as a Trump or an actual leader that was mentally intact. But it's still dangerous. And I did hear a little caveat that Blinken was, in some room with press or whatever, and he just like turned in his chair when he heard that in the media. And essentially, this is really scary. As he was saying that, the press in real time were getting texts from the White House walking it back
Yep,
in real time without even
in real time.
consulting him.
Dana Perino has talked about this. Now she is a commentator on Fox, but she was the press secretary for George W. Bush. And she said it is absolutely amazing to her that the White House immediately goes into damage control mode and says, no, 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 that's not what he meant. Where every press secretary previous to this would wait until the president stopped speaking, go to them and go, all right, is this what you meant to say? We need to rephrase it maybe, but let's put some spin on this. But they would always check with the president, is that what you meant to say? Now they just go while before he even stops speaking, no, 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 that's not what he meant to say, that's not our policy.
Yeah, but you'd have to be very naive. Now you're certainly in the communications business. Um, if they don't have, and the strategic business, you'd be very naive not to think that they have a whole team of people, the real time gaff managers that follow his every move, and even plant Easter bunnies to prevent him from screwing up.
They do. I mean, we've seen this happen. What makes it scary is not just the fact that we have a president that's not capable of speaking properly and saying what needs to be said, but the fact that when he announces a policy, the administration is actually walking it back, which means he's not, it's more evidence that he's not even in charge.
No question about it. There's speculation who is, but that's for another matter. But I don't know if it was a gaffe, but very troubling when he was, they're talking about $7 and possibly potentially, if you look at what Phillips 66 has done in California to reprogram their pumps to accept $10 a gallon gas. So Joey and the Democratic Party is supposedly the party of the little people, right? The blue collar. I think that's gone out the window years ago. But anyway, so what does Joe say? He goes, it's a dramatic transformation